Now, how many of you were listening to that? How many of you want to be different?
Wife says I already am.
Okay, all right. Well, I wasn't kind of going for that sort of different. The kind of different I was going for was, how many of you would like to be closer to Christ? How many of you would like to not struggle with a habitual sin like you've been struggling with for years and years and years and years? Now you think, well, you know, maybe my sin ain't so bad, it's not that big a deal. I just lie all the time. Maybe it's something different for you. You see, because for everybody, we all have something different. And we've been going through 1 John, and we've been talking an awful lot about that habitual sin. We've been talking a lot about our fellowship with God, our responsibilities with those fellowship. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to give us a break today because it's Friends and Family Day, and I'm not going to preach on that same topic again. I'm actually going to go old school today. We're going to go all the way back to the second book of the Bible. We're going to clear back into Exodus. I mean, they're like that far apart. 1 John is almost to the very end. Exodus is at the very beginning. So they can't be the same topic, can it? Well, let's see. I'm going to say something that is going to probably shock you guys. And maybe not. Those that are here a lot have heard me say this. Do you know that over the roughly 10,000 years of biblical history, nothing's changed? That people are still the same as they were then? Think, well, that's not right. We're taller. We're smarter. We don't have to hunt food. Well, yeah, technology's changed, but people haven't. People are still the same. The things that troubled the people in Genesis and Exodus still trouble us today. That's why the Old Testament is still very relevant to us this day. We think, well, you know, that's so old. Nothing like that happens today. Well, let's see about that. Let's see if it does. Now, we're going to start out in Exodus 5. And a little bit of the backstory here is Moses was raised in Egypt, commits murder, he runs into the desert, he gets married, lives out there for about 40 years with his family, and everything's cool. He's like this sheep herder guy, everything's fine, nothing's going on. Everything's just copacetic as copacetic gets. Till one day there's this bush and it's on fire. Now it wouldn't be that big a deal to see something burn up in a desert, right? Well, this bush ain't burning up. It's not being consumed. So he's like, I'm going to go check this out. So he goes, checks it out. Him and God have this conversation. He argues with God. God says, I'm going to send you back to Egypt. He says, no, I can't go back to Egypt. In a sense, I'm a wanted man. I'm wanted for murder. I go back to Egypt, they're going to hunt me down and kill me. That's a capital crime. I can't do that. And besides, God, I got this really bad. I can't talk real well. Maybe you should send Aaron. You think, well, that doesn't sound like us today. Well, yeah, it kind of does. How many of you have ever thought you should do a ministry but then ended up, arguing God out of it? So he goes back. He heads off to Egypt. Him and Aaron. God relents and lets him have Aaron. So one of the first things they do is they go talk to Pharaoh. In that famous line, "Thus saith the Lord, let my people go." And Pharaoh said, cool, you guys are out of here. That's what happened, right? Nah, that's not what happened at all. Well, they go do that. And Pharaoh, being the maniacal dictator that he is, says, you know what? You guys obviously have too much time on your hands because all you're interested in, you want to take off, go on this 3-day hike out in the wilderness and offer and worship God. So obviously, you're bored, and I'm not working you hard enough. So from now on, the bricks you're making, instead of me supplying you with the raw material you need, the straw that you need for it, it's not going to happen. You're going to have to go fetch your own straw. You're going to have to go do this on your own. But you don't get to reduce the number of bricks. You have to produce the same amount. And if you don't produce the same amount, there'll be consequences. Well, as it turns out, they did not produce the same amount. And there were consequences. They got the tar beat out of them because, if a slave ain't doing his job, what do? You got to beat it, right? That's exactly what happened. Pharaoh beat the fire out of these people. So the foreman and the taskmasters went to Pharaoh and said, you can't keep doing this, man. You can't keep beating these people and not giving them the material. They're not going to be able to do the work. And Pharaoh replies with, I'm not changing my mind. Y'all are lazy. If y'all would do your job, quit thinking about worshiping God, quit thinking about this trek that Moses and Aaron want to take you on out in the middle of the desert to sacrifice to the Lord. You see, because the bottom line of it is, y'all are a bunch of liars. I know what you're up to. You're going to go out there in that wilderness and you're going to take off on me. So, no straw, no raw materials, and keep the work up. So what happens by the time you get down to verse 21? People come back out of this meeting with Pharaoh, and they confront Moses and Aaron, and they say, may the Lord look upon you and judge you, because you have made us stink in the sight of Pharaoh and his servants, and have put a sword in their hand to kill us. That's what the people are saying. Moses and Aaron are sent by God to set them free. All these years of bondage in Egypt. They're there to say, we're going to go this way. It's time for us to leave Egypt. And it gets worse. So the people rebel against already. And what they're saying this, in common language, if you will, is, you know what? We hope the Lord takes care of you. And not the good kind of take care of. They're actually asking for Moses to judge him and to condemn him. And they're saying, you know what? And these Egyptians now are taskmasters, are slaveholders, if you will, are so mad at us now, they've picked up the sword and they're going to kill us. And even Moses is confused by this situation, because then he goes to the Lord in verse 22 and says, Lord, why have you done evil to these people? Why do you send me to them? For since I came and spoke to Pharaoh your name, he's done nothing but evil. And your people have not been delivered. So we think, yeah, that's Old Testament. Yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds like, know what they kind of went through there. But you know what has become, to them, so accustomed to being slaves, that they're resisting the efforts to set them free. The Israelites, the Hebrews, they had been there almost 400 years, right about that time, from the time that they migrated there with Joseph. And they grew in population. They grew so much that the Egyptians were afraid of them. So the Egyptians made them slaves. Matter of fact, they were such slaves, and Egypt had such control over them. If you recall from the birth of Moses, they were killing all the babies that were being born. That's how much control Egypt had over their lives. So they weren't just slaves physically. They were being held back by the Egyptians mentally, spiritually, and emotionally, because they wouldn't let them go worship. They weren't free to do God's will. They weren't free to live a life that pleased Him. They weren't free to do what He needed them to do. They were slaves. And God sends Moses to them, to try to get them out of this. They set them free. But what happens? They resist. They resist because they have become so comfortable in their bondage. They are resisting the efforts to take that step forward, to be free. Matter of fact, that comfortability, if you will, that accustomment to that slavery had grown so entrenched in their lives that they were actually more concerned about what the boss thought, about what the taskmaster thought, than what God thought. Because the message from Moses was very, very clear. We're going to go out in the desert 3 days, we're going to worship, we're going to sacrifice, and I'm going to set you free. Basic, simple, clear message. But they didn't deem or understand that that freedom was worth the hardship. You see, because we get into our comfort zone and we get right where we're at, and it's pretty cool right here. I understand how it works here. It's not great, but I've gotten used to it. It's okay. I can deal with it. So we just let life go right here in this comfort zone. And even though it's comfortable, we're missing a point. And the point is, it takes courage to take that step out of that comfort zone. So what's holding you back? What's holding me back? It's fear. Maybe I like my comfort zone. Maybe it's grief that's holding me back. Maybe I'm afraid to move forward with my life because I have become so comfortable being upset and sad that I just don't know how to live happy, to live well. Maybe it's a destructive, sinful habit. Maybe it's a lifestyle change that I need to make. Maybe it's my past that's holding me back. How can the past? You know, some of us here have some gray hair and thinning hair, and some of us have had some experience in life. How many of you have ever said or told a back in the day story? Come on, raise your hands. Back in the day. You know, back in the day when I was younger, now if y'all got kids, you have said this. I had to walk 5 miles uphill to school every day, in the snow, one way without shoes, because my parents were so poor. Everybody's talked about a back in the day situation. You know what that is? You know what that actually signifies? You're living back in the day, and not in the present. Now that can be a good thing because, you know, things were great back in the day. But what the problem is, when you're back in the day, you're robbing today of its fulfillment because you're still back in the day. And that could be a negative too. Back in the day, somebody broke my heart. Somebody tore me up. So I'm not going to live in the present because I'm still hanging on to that hurt, that grief, that anger, that frustration from back in the day. See, living back in the day robs us of our present and negates our future. See, because if we're not here, how can we live here and look at tomorrow and even make any sort of plan for tomorrow when we're still back here, when we're still stuck in that slavery and that bondage? The great thing about bondage is nothing changes. If you don't want no change, stay back in the day. Stay in your grief. As a matter of fact, some people will take their bondage, they take that grief, and these Hebrews did it as well, and they made themselves out to be martyrs for their grieving cause. Oh, look at how bad I've got it. Look, it's terrible. That martyrdom does nothing but gain momentary attention. It never fixes or cures the problems. And then if someone comes to you and says, here is the way, here is the truth, here is the life, here is how you can overcome that sinful behavior, here is how you can overcome grief, here is how you can overcome fear. A lot of times what happens is we're like, oh, we can't talk to that person. Oh, that's terrible. We do like the Israelites do. We're like, look at that Moses. Look at what he's wrecking our life. But for us, maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's your pastor. Maybe it's a leader in your church. Maybe it's a close friend. Maybe it's somebody you've known a long time. They're trying to help you. But we resist. We're like, no, I'm staying right here where I'm at. I like my little world. I like my little prison. I've decorated my little prison up really nice. You see, I got pictures of my family on the walls. I've got, nice TV in my prison. I got a comfortable recliner in my prison. A gilded prison's still a prison. Bondage is still bondage, no matter how you look at it. The question that we must bring ourselves to is, have we been lulled into a comfortable relationship with our bondage? Has it become something that is so familiar to us that we just can't imagine life without it? Do we fear change more than we fear God's will to be free? It's exactly what they were doing. They were more afraid of freedom. They were afraid of change. They were afraid to move forward. And are we willing to let God do whatever is necessary to set us free? And I'll put a little disclaimer in here. Before someone goes off and does something silly and says, you know what? I listened to the sermon last Sunday and the pastor said, I got to be free. So I'm running buck wild. We are free from sin, not free to sin. Huge difference. Now you're probably going to ask yourself, how in the world can I be free? How is that possible? I don't have the strength. You see, how many of you have ever tried to do a diet? Take on a diet. Anybody take on a diet? Really? Nobody took on a diet in January? Nobody wanted to lose 10 pounds? How many of you are eating ice cream? Because that diet that you took on in January is now cake and ice cream sort of diet. Yeah. It's it, I'm giving up pizza. Till I can call in and order one. If you have ever battled with your will or your willpower, you know and should know one thing. It's a losing fight. You're not going to win always. Sometimes you will, sometimes you won't. So, if we're going to get out of our bondage, if we're going to break that will, we have to do something to overcome the desire. We have to do something to overcome our will. We have to be stronger than what we presently are. I'm trying to think, how could we be stronger? How could we accomplish something like that? Oh, that's right. You guys ever heard of Jesus? You know what he said? He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the way. That first part, let's look at that. I am the way. I am the way to freedom. That's how. I am the truth. That same passage he says, if my word abides in you, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And I am the life. You see, a slave doesn't have life. Not his own life. In that passage, Jesus tells us that he is the way. And it is his truth that sets us free. And he is the one that gives us life. And not just life, but life more abundantly. So the key to overcoming bondage, the key to overcoming is simply found in Jesus. But Jesus has been dead for over 2,000 years. He's gone. What do I do? Well, he said, abide in me. How is that possible? It's simple, believe it or not. It really is. It's real simple. The Holy Bible. That's pretty neat. I'll bet you can flip in here and you can turn around. You know, if you just open it up, knock the dust off of it, and start reading a little bit, and start asking God questions. Like, God, what does this mean? I don't understand. I don't understand how this works. Show me. Oh, and then that accomplishes the second thing we do. Talking to God. You see, prayer is pretty simple. Everybody likes to make it out to be some convoluted thing. Prayer is simply a conversation with God through Jesus at the prompting and guidance of the Holy Spirit. And yes, that is my definition of prayer. It's just that simple. It's just talking to God. How many of you have ever had a friendship that you've tried to build? Did you build it by ignoring the other person? If you're trying to build your fellowship with God so that you can overcome a bondage situation, so you can overcome a sinful habit, so you can overcome grief, stress, worry, anxiety, whatever the case may be, you have to talk to the one who said, be of good cheer. You will have struggle in this world, but I have overcame it all. The way, the truth, and the life. If you want to be overcomers, one way. God didn't give us a whole bunch of multiple choice answers. It's just one way. Abide in Jesus. Abiding is simply getting into the Word. Letting God, through His Word, talk to you. Praying, talking back to God. Hey God, what's going on? Worshiping Him, thanking Him, praising Him. Letting Him be involved in your life. And you being involved in what He's doing. That's simply it, guys. It's the whole kit and caboodle. That's the gospel, and that's the key to life. All wrapped up right there in one spot. Let's all stand and pray. Lord, I don't know the situation that anybody's in. You do. Without a doubt, Lord, you do. I don't. But Lord, I do know this one thing. I do know the human condition. And the human condition, it would dictate and tell us, Lord, that we are all struggling with something. All of us are sinners saved by grace. All of us are still in the flesh, Lord, and we all still have a sin nature. All of us hurt. All of us are joyful. All of us have pride issues. Lord, those things that hold us back, you can set us free from. Pray, Lord, that you would do your work in each of our lives in such a way that we can't help but to say, Lord, that was you. Lord, help us break those chains that hold us back. Not because it's a matter of my will, not because it's a matter of my strength, but because it's a matter of your strength in me. So help us, Lord, to always turn to you first in every situation. In the joyful situations so we don't get prideful. In the sad situations so we don't grieve. In the difficult situations so we don't become anxious. In the hurtful situations so we don't become bitter. Lord, you can break those chains. And that's what we're asking you to do in each of our hearts today, Lord. Break those chains. In Jesus' name, amen. Now for our last song.